Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The sensex and the Nifty end with marginal losses after a volatile session. Midcaps see sharper cuts with the midcap index losing nearly 1,000 points. India and China reach an agreement to resume patrolling across the contested border in Eastern Ladakh. This marks a significant step in easing tensions since the 2020 Galwan clashes. India's Foreign Secretary says this development could lead to eventual disengagement at the border. The Israeli army launches a wave of attacks across Lebanon, strikes several buildings in Beirut belonging to a Hezbollah-run bank. The World Health Organization says they will be evacuating 1,000 women and children needing medical care from Gaza to Europe. India's aviation minister rules out any conspiracy as of now after airlines get nearly 100 hoax bomb threats in the last 7 days. The minister says the government is considering stricter punishment by amending the law. Other Poonawalla Serene Production signs a deal to acquire a 50% stake in Karan Johar's Dharma Productions for 1,000 crore rupees. Johar will hold the remaining 50% stake and will continue as the executive chairman. The board of Zomato is set to meet tomorrow to consider an 8,500 crore rupee fundraise. The company also plans to approach the RBI to restrict foreign holding to 49%. Meanwhile, Zomato's founder Dipinder Goyal launches a new health tech venture in his personal capacity. Officials of the National Investigative Agency arrive at the crime scene where 7 employees of an infrastructure company were gunned down by militants in Jammu and Kashmir. This is the first major attack on an infra project as workers building a tunnel are targeted. Well, let's start with the markets. Failed to hold on to opening gains and ended the day lower amidst a fair degree of volatility. The Nifty and the Sensex fell 0.25%. Banks also falling in line, so it was a flat close for the Nifty. The Sensex closing about 70-odd points lower. The midcap index down by about 970 points, and the Nifty Bank lost about 130 points today. So across the board, we have seen some pressure coming in, but the market's closing in the red. The big story this evening, India and China have reached an agreement to resume patrolling across the contested border in Eastern Ladakh. Now, this marks a significant step in easing tensions between both nations after the 2020 clashes between both armies. India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri says the agreement is a result of the discussions that have taken place over several weeks. Military leaders from India and China have held more than 30 rounds of negotiations after the Galwan clashes. Announcing the patrolling agreement, the Foreign Secretary said this development could lead to an eventual disengagement at the border. The announcement comes just a day ahead of the BRICS summit in Russia, where Prime Minister Modi will come face-to-face with China's President Xi Jinping.
You're aware of the events that took place in 2020 in several areas along the line of actual control. We've been in discussions with Chinese interlocutors, both at a diplomatic level, through the WMCC, as was mentioned earlier as well, and through the at the military level as well, through meetings of the military commanders at various levels. These discussions had in the past resulted in the resolution of standoffs at various locations. You're also aware that there were a few areas and few locations where the standoff had not been resolved. Now, as a result of the discussions that have taken place over the last several weeks, an agreement has been arrived at on patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control in the India-China border areas.
Well, that's the Foreign Secretary saying that there has been agreement arrived at between India and China on disengagement at the LAC. The big global story, Israel has deepened its offensive in Beirut after striking several financial institutions allegedly linked to the Hezbollah. The Israeli military also launched at least 12 missiles that hit Beirut's southern suburbs. Israel's foreign minister signaled more attacks on Hezbollah, saying its forces will keep striking the Iranian proxy until it collapses. Israeli forces have also intensified attacks across Gaza. Several Palestinians were wounded after an attack on a refugee camp in northern Gaza. Israeli forces claim it is using precision strikes against alleged regrouping efforts by Hamas in Gaza. The UN's human rights officers warned that Israeli military's action in northern Gaza may cause the destruction of the Palestinian population through death and displacement. US defense officials have said that Israel should scale back some of its strikes in Beirut and push for negotiations.
The numbers of casualties have been, civilian casualties have been far too high. We'd like to see Israel scale back on some of the strikes that it's taking, especially in and around Beirut. and we'd like to see things transition to some sort of negotiation that would allow civilians on both sides of the border to return to their homes.
I had a very nice call with him. He called me up yesterday morning. We talked. I congratulated him on obviously doing a very good job keeping Israel safe. He's doing very well. He calls me on occasion. I think he wants my views on things. He's had very little cooperation from the White House, as you know. They didn't want him to do anything, and they would not be in the good position they're in right now if they listened to the White House.
With the killing of Sinwar, this creates an opening that I believe we must take full advantage of to dedicate ourselves to ending this war and bringing the hostages home.
But it's not working so far.
You know what, listen, as it relates to the issues in the Middle East and in particular in that region, it has never been easy. But that doesn't mean we give up, okay? It is always going to be difficult. It does not mean we give up.
Well, that's Kamala Harris. Here's another development moving markets worldwide. China has cut its benchmark lending rates in a bid to revive the economy. The one-year loan prime rate was reduced by 25 basis points and the five-year rate was reduced by 25 basis points. The one-year rate influences corporate loans and most household loans in China, while the five-year LPR rate is a benchmark for mortgage rates. So that's the latest there from China. Oil prices have opened steady after declining over 7% last week. Worries about demand from China and easing concerns of potential supply disruption in the Middle East continue to weigh on sentiment. Brent is now around $73 per barrel. Gold prices, meanwhile, touching new record highs again. The yellow metal has surged over 33% so far in 2024 and has recorded the best annual gains in 14 years. Silver also touching a 12-year high after surging 42% in 2024 so far. Earnings. Cement major Ultratech has reported a weak second quarter. Net profit and margins missing street estimates. Revenue in line. On an annual basis, net profit dropped 36%, while revenue declined 2%. The company's domestic sales volume grew 3%, which was largely in line with street expectations. And nearly 100 hoax bomb threats in the last 7 days have left the Indian aviation sector in a state of panic. All major airlines, including Air India, Vistara, Indigo, Akasa Air and SpiceJet, have been at the receiving end of these threats, primarily originating from social media and emails. While all the threats have turned out to be fake so far, it has disrupted flights scheduled, caused inconvenience to passengers and added to airlines' expenses. The government has already held a series of meetings with airlines and the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security to find a way to curb the menace. Addressing a press conference earlier today, the Civil Aviation Minister, Ram Mohan Naidu, said they are considering amending a 42-year-old law to ensure stricter action against the perpetrators. This also includes putting them on a no-fly list. Naidu also ruled out any conspiracy behind the hoax threats as of now. Take a look.
From the ministry, we have thought of some legislative action also, if it is required, which direction should be moved. And we have come to the conclusion that there are two areas that we can explore. One is the amendment in aircraft security rules. One of the idea that we want to propagate by changing these rules is, once we catch hold of the perpetrator who is behind this, we want to put them in the no-fly list. And the second one is the suppression of unlawful acts against safety of Civil Aviation Act.
Bengaluru-based NBFC Navi FinService called off its plan to issue bonds worth 100 crore rupees. This comes days after the Reserve Bank of India barred Navi from issuing new loans, citing concerns over its pricing policies. The company said it maintains a healthy liquidity position and that there was no immediate need for external funding at this point in time. The board of Zomato will meet tomorrow to consider an 8,500 crore rupee fundraise. The move is likely to take domestic shareholding above 50%. Zomato is also likely to approach the RBI to restrict the shareholding of foreign institutional investors to 49%. Nimesh is here with more. Nimesh.
Well, all eyes will be on the Zomato board meet tomorrow, where the company is going to consider not only the earnings but the fundraising as well. I understand from sources that the board is likely to approve a $1 billion QIP issue along with the results. Now, this will help the domestic holding to go up above 50%. And after the fundraising, I understand the company is likely to write to RBI to cap the FI holding at 49%. Essentially, this has been done to make sure that it eases off the business for Blinkit. Now, because there are a lot of restrictions, FDI restrictions, as far as the e-com business is concerned. The combined holding as of now in Zomato for the FIs and FDIs is little over 50%. So that's likely to fall after the QIP issue of $1 billion.
Nimesh, many thanks for joining us. Well, we will be tracking that board meeting closely here on CNBC-TV18. And speaking of Zomato, CEO Deepinder Goyal has launched a new venture. It's called Continue, which will focus on health tracking and mental health solutions. In a post on X, Goyal said that the startup is entirely funded by him and is currently focused on his personal health. Now, other Poonawalla Serene Production has signed a deal to buy a 50% stake in Karan Johar's Dharma Productions. This deal values Dharma Productions at 2,000 crore rupees. Shilpa joins us now with the details. Shilpa, there's been plenty of speculation on Karan Johar's Dharma Productions being in talks with several big players, and they found a suitor, an unusual choice in Adar Poonawalla.
Well, yeah, it's going from vaccines now to films for Adar Poonawalla, who has picked up a 50% stake in Karan Johar's Dharma Productions. Now, this has been behind films like, as we know, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, Student of the Year, Brahmastra, Rocky and Rani. Now, this deal, which includes Dharma Productions and its digital content arm Dharmatic, also values Dharma at about 2,000 crore rupees. Now, there's no change at the helm. Karan Johar and the CEO Apurva Mehta will continue to run the show. But this deal gives Dharma the capital for big budgeted films, to build more franchises for scale, and in general to do a lot more when it comes to content production. Now, this deal, remember, it comes at a time where the industry has been struggling. It has had costs of production and costs of artists that have been soaring. Most movies in the past year have failed to rake in the moolah. Most of Dharma's big budget bets like Kalank, Kill, Brahmastra in the past did not work as anticipated. And of course, there is also competition coming in from OTTs. Now, if you look at Dharma's financials, revenues for FY24 in fact fell 50%, while net profit plummeted over 90%. And the revenue decline was mainly led by the distribution and exhibition segment, and there was a revenue decline from satellite rights segment also. But the digital platform, that grew nearly 16%. And this, sort of paints a picture of the current scenario of the entertainment industry, and therefore this partnership is hoping to reshape the industry to cater to today's digital-first audience and then embrace new platforms and formats. Analysts too are hopeful that in general this deal, bringing in more funds to the industry, will also translate into a more sustainable content pipeline down the line. Back to you.
All right, Shilpa, appreciate you joining us. That's the big deal that's being inked. Adar Poonawalla signs up for Dharma Productions. Time for us to head to a break, but up next, Hyundai India is all set to drive into Dalal-Street. The big listing is tomorrow. We trace the journey of Hyundai India, its mega IPO and more when we return. On to the global stories that we're tracking this evening. There's a little more than 2 weeks to go for Election Day in the United States, and both the presidential candidates are campaigning in full swing. Former President and Republican candidate Donald Trump was seen wearing a black and yellow apron serving French fries at a McDonald's in Philadelphia. The campaign stop was intended as a jibe at opponent Kamala Harris, who spoke of working at the fast food chain in her youth. Trump claimed that he worked 15 minutes more than Kamala at McDonald's. And Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris celebrated her 60th birthday by participating in 2 worship services in Atlanta. Music icon Stevie Wonder performed at the campaign, also sang Happy Birthday for Harris. She spoke about how her religious experiences shaped her politics and cautioned against the country getting further divided and the spreading of hate. US King Charles was heckled by an Australian senator at the Parliament House in Canberra soon after he finished his address in Parliament. Senator Lydia Thorpe was heard shouting, "You're not my king, this is not your land." Thorpe accused the British monarch of committing a genocide against Indigenous Australians. King Charles is on the second official day of his engagement in Australia. In national news, at least 7 people were killed when militants opened fire on a construction site in Jammu and Kashmir's Gandarbal district. Officials of the National Investigation Agency have arrived at the crime scene to conduct a probe. Officials have also identified the victims as a doctor, labourers and staff of a contractor working on a tunnel for the Srinagar-Leh National Highway. This is the first major attack on an infra project where workers building a tunnel have been targeted. The 4,300 crore rupee IPO of Vari Energies has received a stellar response from investors. The issue was fully subscribed within 2 hours of its launch. Bidding was led by non-institutional investors with over 6 times subscription, followed by retail with nearly 3 times as of 4 p.m. today. Vari Energies is India's largest solar PV maker and aims to use the funds to set up a manufacturing facility and for general corporate purposes. Health insurer Niva Bupa has received the final observations from SEBI to raise 3,000 crore rupees through an IPO. The IPO will be a mix of fresh issue and 2,200 crores worth offer for sale. The net proceeds from the fresh issuance will be used to strengthen solvency levels and for general corporate purposes. Niva Bupa has filed its IPO papers in June this year. And speaking of IPOs, Hyundai India is all set to drive into Dalal-Street tomorrow. The company's IPO has been fully subscribed after qualified institutional buyers came to the rescue. Hyundai India planning to list with a lot of fanfare. We expect about 200 Hyundai executives who have flown down to Mumbai to be at the NSE tomorrow for the listing. Hyundai India's 28,000 crore rupee IPO has been the largest in India to date. Sudarshan retraces the Hyundai journey, which began nearly 8 decades ago in South Korea. Sud.
In 1946, Chung Ju-young, after enduring years of struggles, opened a car repair shop and named it Hyundai, meaning modern. South Korea, still reeling from the devastation of World War II, was in dire need of rebuilding. Seizing the moment, Chung founded Hyundai Engineering and Construction. Determined to transform the war-torn nation, his company would build the highways and bridges that would pave the way for South Korea's future. After constructing 1,000 kilometers of highways, he turned his attention to the vehicles that would drive on them. And in 1967, Hyundai Motor Company was born. A year later, in 1968, Hyundai released its first car, the Hyundai Cortina, in collaboration with Ford. However, when Ford tried to control Hyundai's path, Chung made a bold decision to part ways and instead partnered with Mitsubishi. Together, they set out to create South Korea's first homegrown car. In 1975, the Hyundai Pony was unveiled, marking a turning point. Affordable and reliable, the Pony wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of national pride and resurgence. Hyundai then set its sights on global markets, entering the UK in 1982 and Canada in 1985, where the Pony quickly became a top seller. In 1986, Hyundai made its US debut with the XL, praised for its affordability and named Best Product by Fortune magazine. By 1991, Hyundai had developed its own proprietary engine and transmission, achieving technological independence. The 1990s brought further expansion. In 1996, Hyundai entered the Indian market with a state-of-the-art plant in Tamil Nadu. 2 years later, the launch of the Santo revolutionized Indian roads by its unique design and affordability, and it made Hyundai a household name overnight. In 1998, as Kia Motors faced bankruptcy, Hyundai acquired a 51% stake, outbidding Ford. The two companies have since shared ownership of key subsidiaries, and while Hyundai remains Kia's largest stakeholder. In the Indian market, Kia entered in the year 2019 with mid-sized SUV Kia Seltos. In India, Hyundai continued to introduce successful models like the Accent, i10 and i20, cementing its position as the second largest automaker. But it was the company's strategic pivot to SUVs marked by the launch of the Creta in 2015 that truly transformed its fortunes. SUVs now account for 67% of Hyundai's sales. In 2019, Hyundai launched India's first fully electric SUV, the Kona. Electric plans to introduce 4 more EVs in near term, including the much-anticipated Creta EV in Q4 of FY25. Today, with a market share of 14%, Hyundai is positioned to grow alongside an industry projected to expand by 4 to 5% to 6.5% through 2030. Hyundai's production capabilities are also scaling. Its Chennai facility produces 8.20 lakh cars annually, while a newly acquired plant in Maharashtra is expected to add an additional 1.70 lakh cars by FY26 and plans to further expand to 2.50 lakh units. Exports account for 20% of Hyundai's output, serving markets in West Asia and Africa, and providing a natural hedge against domestic market fluctuations. If we talk about overall earnings over the last 2 years, revenue has seen a growth in the range of 25 to 30% and profit has surged more than 50%. Now, after 28 years in India, Hyundai is making its capital market debut. In its IPO, which was a fully OFS issue, the promoter diluted 17.5% of its stake, and though the retail portion wasn't fully subscribed, the IPO was oversubscribed, overall driven by institutional investors. Lastly, about the roadmap. Hyundai India is looking to invest Rs 32,000 crore in India over the next 10 years with just one aim, to regain the lost market share. But globally, Hyundai has warned of an uncertain outlook due to intensifying competition. From a small car repair shop to a global automotive powerhouse. That's the story of Hyundai driving the future.
Many thanks, Sudwell. A new chapter in the Hyundai journey starts tomorrow. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned.